In 2011, Japan was struck by one of the most devastating natural disasters in modern history. A magnitude 9.0 undersea earthquake triggered a towering tsunami that wiped out entire towns, killed over 20,000 people, displaced hundreds of thousands more, and triggered a nuclear catastrophe at Fukushima. The scale of destruction was staggering, and it exposed a hard truth. Even one of the most disaster.
If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
Prepared countries in the world wasn't prepared enough. In the aftermath, Japan didn't just grieve, it rebuilt with a mission. The country launched one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects ever attempted, a nearly 400-kilometer-long tsunami defense wall stretching across its northeastern coast. Not a single wall, but a vast, interconnected system of barriers, designed not only to withstand nature's fury, but to buy precious time for evacuation and survival. This wasn't just a quick fix. This was engineering taken to its highest level. Japan's entire approach was methodical, data-driven, and brutally realistic. Every meter of that wall was shaped by research, by painful lessons learned, and by the recognition that disasters of this magnitude are no longer theoretical, they're inevitable. The construction didn't start with cranes and concrete. It started in labs. Engineers began with extensive modeling, scaled tests, simulations, tsunami force calculations. Wall height, slope, foundation depth, every detail was analyzed and revised. They weren't guessing. They were planning for the worst-case scenario, not the average one. Because when the ocean decides to rise, averages mean nothing. One of the biggest challenges was the ground itself. The northeastern coastline of Japan isn't made of bedrock, it's sandy, loose, and fragile. Weak soils mean instability. So before anything could be built, engineers had to dig deep. Foundations were reinforced with long piles driven into the earth, stabilization layers were added, and the entire structure was designed to resist not just waves, but the gradual wear and tear of decades. And that wear and tear, constant. Ocean water doesn't take a day off. The seawalls face a never-ending barrage of salt, wind, pressure, and erosion. That's why post-construction maintenance is just as critical as the building itself. Japan's walls are equipped with sensors to track stress and displacement. Manual inspections are routine. Every crack, every vibration is monitored. These aren't just structures, they're living systems under 24/7 surveillance. For port cities like Iwate, the approach had to be even more precise. Ports can't just be sealed off by massive walls. So engineers developed tailored tsunami gates, some that lower from the top, others that rise from below. These designs protect the harbors while still allowing marine traffic to move, safety and function, side by side. But Japan didn't stop at walls. While the nation was re-engineering its coastlines, it was also digging below them. Japan's underwater tunnel projects are just as impressive, maybe even more so. Using the immersed tube method, engineers constructed massive tunnels beneath the seabed. This involved detailed geological surveys, reinforced concrete segments produced in sequence, and surgical precision in assembly. The result? Vital island-to-island connections that can withstand seismic activity and extreme ocean conditions, strengthening both transportation and national infrastructure. These tunnels aren't just about convenience, they're about survival. In an emergency, every minute counts. And Japan's underwater networks provide critical links between regions that might otherwise be cut off during disasters. The numbers speak volumes. Together, the seawalls and underwater tunnels reduce tsunami impact forces by an estimated 30 to 50%. That's not theoretical. That's real protection, buying time for evacuation and potentially saving thousands of lives when not if the next big wave hits. But it's not just about brute strength. Japan balanced safety with environmental responsibility. Construction teams worked to minimize ecological disruption. Artificial reefs were used to support marine life. Noise mitigation strategies were implemented to protect ocean species. The goal was never to dominate nature but to work around it, with respect and resilience. Because resilience is more than a buzzword in Japan. It's baked into the national identity. This is a country shaped by earthquakes, typhoons, tsunamis, threats that never go away. And yet, Japan doesn't flinch. It adapts. It innovates. It builds smarter, stronger, and more sustainable every single time. This massive wall, this 400-kilometer-long line in the sand, isn't just concrete. It's a symbol of Japan's refusal to be broken by disaster. It's a reminder that survival isn't passive. It's built. But no one's pretending this is the final solution. The engineers know it. The government knows it. Japan recognizes that even the strongest wall has limits. Nature is unpredictable, and future disasters may surpass current models. That's why research continues. Japan is investing in better tsunami forecasting, advanced early warning systems, and next-generation construction techniques. The work isn't done, it never will be. And as global temperatures rise and sea levels increase, Japan's approach is setting the standard. Other coastal nations are watching closely, because what Japan has built isn't just a seawall, it's a blueprint. A roadmap for resilience in the age of extremes. This entire endeavor also has economic consequences, and in a good way. These mega projects aren't just about protection. They drive regional development, create jobs, and improve logistics. Stronger infrastructure means safer ports, faster transport, and more reliable trade. Safety and growth, engineered together. It's a rare thing to see this level of engineering precision paired with long-term strategy and environmental awareness. Most nations don't build this way. They patch. They delay. They wait for the next disaster to make headlines. But Japan didn't wait. They acted. With urgency, with clarity, and with a commitment to never be caught off guard again. This story isn't just about Japan's seawalls or underwater tunnels. It's about what's possible when a nation refuses to accept defeat, when failure becomes fuel, when grief becomes groundwork, and when engineering becomes a form of national resilience. If this kind of monumental infrastructure story impressed you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who thinks seawalls are just boring concrete blocks. And drop a comment: should more countries be building like Japan? What would resilience look like in your city? Make sure you subscribe, because we're diving into more stories just like this where science, survival, and scale collide. Let's be clear, Japan didn't build a 400-kilometer seawall because it wanted to. It built it because it had no choice. The 2011 tsunami was a turning point, not just in terms of destruction, but in what it revealed. Even a hyper-prepared, technologically advanced country like Japan was terrifyingly vulnerable. Prior defenses, some seawalls, warning systems, elevated roads were simply overwhelmed. Whole communities were erased in minutes. That kind of trauma doesn't just fade. It leaves questions. Hard ones, like, how do we make sure this never happens again? And Japan answered with concrete. Not just concrete, though. Innovation, calculation, and above all, engineering realism. Because what followed wasn't a symbolic gesture. It was functional, scientific infrastructure. And it wasn't cheap either. Tens of billions of dollars went into what's now one of the largest tsunami protection systems in history. That's not just investment. That's commitment. You're not building a wall like this unless you're ready to rethink everything: how you protect lives, how you interact with nature, and how much you're willing to sacrifice for security. And yeah, it is a sacrifice. Some communities in the Tohoku region now live in the shadow of towering gray walls that cut off their view of the ocean entirely. These walls are 10, sometimes 15 meters tall, roughly the height of a 4- or 5-story building. For fishing towns that once relied on their view of the sea, it's a cultural shift, and a hard one. But ask the survivors, and the answer's usually the same. It's worth it. Because when the ocean comes crashing back, and it will, they don't want to be caught staring at it again. They want a barrier. They want time to run, to escape, to live. And that's exactly what these walls are designed to buy: time. This isn't some magical fortress that can hold back nature indefinitely. It's a brake, not a stop sign. When a tsunami is incoming, every second matters. That's what these structures are engineered to do: slow the wave, reduce the impact force by up to half, and give people precious extra minutes to evacuate. That's the thing so many people misunderstand. It's not about absolute protection. It's about survivability. Because in a country where earthquakes are a fact of life, you can't afford denial. You can't pretend disaster isn't coming. You have to build around it, under it, through it. That's why Japan didn't just stop at walls. The underwater tunnel projects are a whole separate marvel of engineering, and they're just as essential. Using the immersed tube method, Japan is literally laying massive tunnel segments onto the seabed like giant puzzle pieces. These tunnels link islands and coastal zones that might otherwise be isolated during a disaster. In a country made up of more than 6,000 islands, that kind of mobility is life-saving. But it's not just about escaping danger. These tunnels strengthen logistics. Goods can move faster. Emergency aid can arrive quicker. Critical infrastructure can stay connected, even if roads above are wrecked. It's a quiet form of resilience, the kind you don't notice until it saves lives. And these aren't sloppy projects. Every underwater tunnel begins with exacting geological surveys. Not just where can we build, but where shouldn't we build. Engineers assess pressure, soil density, seismic vulnerability. Only after that comes the actual construction, mass-producing enormous concrete segments and placing them down with centimeter-level accuracy. This is engineering under pressure. Literally, there's no room for error when you're laying infrastructure on the ocean floor in one of the world's most seismically active regions. But Japan has never let natural risk stop its progress, it just incorporates it into the plan. That mindset is part of why these mega projects actually work. There's a level of humility baked into the engineering. Every wall, tunnel, and gate is designed with the knowledge that nothing is ever totally invincible. No matter how thick the concrete or high the gate, nature will always find new ways to test the limits. So instead of pretending otherwise, Japan leans into that uncertainty with constant monitoring. These seawalls, laced with sensors, engineers track stress, water pressure, soil shift, anything that could compromise integrity over time. These aren't build-it-and-forget-it projects. Maintenance is part of the mission, and it has to be. Saltwater is relentless. Waves don't care how much something cost or how long it took to build. If there's a weak point, the ocean will find it. That's why Japan inspects its defenses regularly and upgrades when needed. Nothing's taken for granted, not even a 400-kilometer stretch of reinforced concrete. And the smart design doesn't stop with the seawalls and tunnels. In port cities, where shutting off access to the sea isn't an option, Japan developed tailored tsunami gates. Some rise vertically from the ground when needed. Others drop down from above. The designs are site-specific, customized based on tidal flow, traffic patterns, and ship size. You can't afford a one-size-fits-all approach when you're dealing with multiple ports, each with its own challenges. Japan's approach: design smarter, not just bigger. And let's not forget the ecological aspect. These projects weren't built without environmental considerations. Japan integrated artificial reefs and sound dampening methods to reduce the ecological impact during construction. No one's pretending that pouring concrete into the sea is environmentally perfect, but Japan's engineers actively worked to minimize the damage and preserve local ecosystems where possible. That balance between protection, progress, and preservation is rare in large-scale infrastructure. But it's exactly what makes Japan's system so globally significant. Because other countries are watching, the rest of the world is starting to face the same realities Japan's lived with for decades. Rising sea levels, more frequent megastorms, coastal cities at risk. Japan didn't just build these defenses for itself, it built a working model of what comprehensive disaster preparedness looks like. The blueprint's already here. It shows how to combine scientific forecasting, infrastructure investment, community planning, and national policy into one system designed to save lives before disaster hits, not after. And it's not done. Japan's still building, still researching, still testing, because there's no end to this kind of work. The moment you think you've done enough, nature finds a way to prove otherwise. Japan knows that. That's why its engineers are already looking into the next generation of tsunami modeling, forecasting algorithms, and real-time evacuation systems. They're not just building walls, they're building time machines, devices and structures that don't fight nature, but by the future. Seconds, minutes, hours, enough time to reach higher ground, enough time to survive. That's what this wall is. Not just a barrier, but a gift of time. And time, when disaster strikes, is everything. Here's the thing, this entire project, the seawalls, the tunnels, the gates, the meticulous testing and maintenance wasn't just about rebuilding. It was about refusing to surrender. After 2011, Japan could have gone the route so many nations do after a disaster: hold a few ceremonies, build some memorials, and maybe throw up a few temporary structures to check the box. But Japan didn't flinch. It doubled down. It stared the Pacific Ocean in the face and said, "We are not going to let this happen again. Not like that." And that's what makes this so different. This isn't just a case study in civil engineering, it's a masterclass in national resolve. Because there were criticisms. Of course there were. Some said the cost was too high. Others worried about the aesthetics, the walls blocking sea views, changing the character of coastal towns. Environmental groups were wary about the long-term impact on marine ecosystems. Residents felt torn. Protecting lives versus preserving cultural identity isn't an easy debate. But Japan made a choice. Prioritize safety. Prioritize the next generation's ability to live without the looming shadow of catastrophe. And then, build smarter to minimize those trade-offs. These seawalls didn't erase the landscape, they redefined it. Some communities have turned them into public spaces, with walking paths and parks built on top. In places where ocean views were lost, new lookout points were created. And that's the balance Japan keeps striking: resilience without total loss of place. Because the truth is, you can't live next to the ocean and pretend it's only ever going to be beautiful. That same sea that feeds and connects also destroys. And when it turns, it doesn't knock. It doesn't wait for readiness. It just comes. So you either build for it or rebuild after it. And Japan chose the former. Not out of fear, but out of knowledge. Out of experience. Out of the hard-earned wisdom that no one else wanted to earn the way they did. The technology behind these projects is mind-blowing, yes. But it's not the tech that's most impressive, it's the commitment. The way an entire country mobilized not just to restore what was lost, but to make sure future generations never have to live through the same horror. And let's not forget what that horror looked like. When the tsunami struck in 2011, it wasn't just waves. It was walls of water 40 meters high swallowing highways. Trains vanished. Schools filled with children were crushed. Families were swept away in seconds. That kind of trauma rewrites the human brain. It changes what you think is possible. It forces you to choose denial or adaptation. Japan chose adaptation, and then it went further. It built a line of defense so vast, so engineered, so relentlessly monitored that the rest of the world has no choice but to take notice. This isn't theoretical. It's tested. It's been hit by aftershocks, seasonal tides, rough weather, and it stands. It's holding. And that's not just a testament to materials, it's a testament to mindset. Because infrastructure like this doesn't happen unless a nation is willing to plan in decades, not news cycles. It takes political will, community consensus, scientific expertise, and an almost uncomfortable level of future-focused thinking. Things many governments struggle with. But Japan didn't just do it. They did it under pressure, in grief, with the weight of the world watching. And now it's the gold standard. Countries facing their own rising waters and seismic threats are looking at Japan's approach and asking the same question. Can we build like that? Should we build like that? What would it take? And the answer is yes, but not without accepting a few hard truths. That you're going to spend billions and not see a direct return. That people might complain about the view. That nature doesn't negotiate. That engineering is only as strong as your willingness to fund it, maintain it, and respect it. Japan knows that. Every inspection, every maintenance round, every software update to their tsunami forecasting systems is a quiet reaffirmation of the same core belief. Resilience is never done. And it's not cheap. But what's the cost of doing nothing? What's the cost of rebuilding your entire coastline every time the ocean decides to test your limits? Japan made that calculation. And they chose steel-reinforced concrete. They chose deep foundations and shock-absorbing structures. They chose sensors, backup generators, emergency tunnels. They chose not to hope the next disaster wouldn't come but to prepare for it like it absolutely would. And that, right there, is the difference. Hit that like button if you respect what Japan has built. Share this with someone who underestimates the power of infrastructure. And leave a comment: what would you want to see built in your country to protect the future? Make sure you subscribe, because there are more stories like this. Real engineering, real disasters, real resilience, and the real people behind it all.